President Trump addressed the United Nations General Assembly today in a stump-style speech, including touting that he ended 7 conflicts. The president told the assembly it failed to live up to its tremendous potential. He said the United States is prepared to impose stiff tariffs against Russia and criticized countries that bought oil from Russia. So we have team coverage on this important UN meeting, including comments from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy just a short time ago. Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini joins us now live from the United Nations headquarters, and White House correspondent Haley Bull is on the North Lawn. So Haley, let's start with you, because the president put out a post on Truth Social a short time ago, a pretty big change, a big departure in tone regarding the war between Ukraine and Russia in that post. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Maritza, this is a significant statement from President Trump. One appears to give a vote of confidence that Ukraine can take territory back, and it is the first of this nature that we have heard from President Trump. The president writing on Truth Social that he thinks Ukraine, with EU support, is, quote, in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, going on to say the borders from when the war started is, quote, very much an option. And again, this is the first time we have publicly heard President Trump indicate that Ukraine may be able to recapture territory, as officials have repeatedly said each side would likely have to cede some land. The president in that same post saying that, quote, Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and now is the time for Ukraine to act, going on to say when the Ukrainians learn more that perhaps Ukraine, quote, would be able to take back their country in its original form, and who knows, maybe even go further than that. Trump reiterating this position earlier today while meeting with France's president. Listen.
It could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week. For nothing, for nothing. So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago, and I'm glad you got it. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
Now, Maritza, the timing of this tone comes as the president has threatened further economic penalties against Russia absent a deal to end the war, something he has threatened for some time now but not moved forward with acting on beyond imposing tariffs against India for its purchases of Russian oil, something he reiterated during his UN General Assembly speech today as well.
And Jason, you've spent a lot of time on the ground in Ukraine. I know there are a lot of threads to pull on in that post that the president put on Truth Social, but let's start with this. Is it possible for Ukraine to regain the land it has so far lost to Russia?
Hi, Maritza. Well, until today, that was not even part of the discussion. And since that summit in Alaska with Putin, what they were talking about was Ukraine having to withdraw from territories that were still under its control. But this Truth Social post, and this happened just as I was inside that press conference with President Zelensky, who was seeming more upbeat than he typically is after these meetings. This was his 4th meeting with President Trump since he took office. But let's unpack this one statement that Trump said in Truth Social, that Ukraine will win back all of Ukraine back in its original form. Back in its original form, that would include Crimea. This is an area that Ukraine has always said they want to get back, but it seems just an impossibility because Russia's been entrenched there. It seems that, and it appears that Zelensky and his team shared information with Trump and his team to indicate that things are going a lot better on the battlefield. And then one other point I want to make here, because Trump made this point, and here's Zelensky using almost identical words, talking about Russia's economy being in bad shape. And you had Trump in his post pointing to the gasoline lines in Russia, suggesting that people are going to wake up there and realize that this war is costing them way too much. And one of the reasons why they're, not one of the reasons, the reason they're waiting in line is because Ukraine has been clobbering Russian oil infrastructure, their ability to produce oil and gas. They've been doing that every day, Maritza.
Yeah, and Jason, we have a spokesperson for the State Department coming on in about a half hour, and I plan to ask him about that question about Crimea, if that's included in the president's post. Haley, I know you wanted to step in.
Yeah, Maritza, and piggybacking off what Jason is saying too, one of the things that's really notable in this is throughout this second term in the Trump administration, we have heard him at times take a more critical tone towards Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That is something that we have not heard today as we are seeing this shift in tone and trying to dissect what particularly was the piece of information behind it. Trump has focused his criticism in these remarks really solely on Putin and Russia, as he has repeatedly said in recent days that Putin has let him down. Just last week, though, Trump had said that Zelensky needed to make a deal. That's not the same message we are hearing from him today.
And Jason, I mean, you have covered this war in Ukraine from the beginning. How many times have I tossed to you to report on what's happening there on the ground? So you were in that meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky today. What really stood out to you?
What stood out to me most was the way that he talked about President Trump. And of course, Zelensky wants to say nice things to avoid the kind of problems that he had in the past. He needs to not upset Trump. We know that. But he was describing Trump as a game changer. And I believe we have some sound from that press conference just a short while ago.
Trump is a game changer by himself if he will be sure in Ukraine, and I think that he is more close now to this situation, and that's why, and between us, only Trump can. For today, we know some not too much players in the world who can be game changers.
So he went on to say, Zelensky went on to say that he can't share it, but there's some very important information about the front lines that he shared with Trump. But what you have Zelensky doing here is just saying that there's been almost an awakening of President Trump to Ukraine's position on this war. And Haley Bullock highlighted this as well, that this is kind of shocking right now, to be honest, based on what we've been hearing since January, and when Trump's been very critical of Ukraine, has at times even sounded like he's parroting the Russian narrative, Putin's narrative, and now he's saying that Russia is a paper tiger, that they're going to lose, that Ukraine could win this whole thing. It's really astounding.
Yeah, it's quite a departure. And Haley, I want to ask you one more question, because we know that the President Trump, also met with French President Emmanuel Macron. He had kind words to say about his French counterpart. So what came up as far as the war in Gaza? Because we know that France, along with other countries, have now recognized a Palestinian state.
Yeah, Maritza, he certainly had kind words for the French president, but at the same time, we saw both leaders tap dance around their positions on Gaza in particular. To set the stage, in recent days, we have seen major U.S. allies like the UK, Australia, Canada, and France move to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, this is something Trump has said he disagrees with. In his UN General Assembly speech, he equated it to rewarding Hamas. And in that bilateral meeting with the French president, he said that he is, quote, on the side of Israel, going on to say he will get a solution. French President Macron, for his part, defended his position, telling President Trump that nobody forgets October 7th, but questioning the results after 2 years. Now, this is an issue where the U.S. has become more isolated amongst its allies, but has also stayed firm. This afternoon, it's notable that the president is also holding a multilateral meeting with a number of Middle Eastern nations who have played a key role when it comes to Gaza. In particular, some of those included Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Indonesia, to name a few. Turkey's president is scheduled to come to the White House later this week, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said in recent days he plans to meet with Trump after the General Assembly as well.
Jason,
one thing
I know
I'd like
that
to
you've
add,
been following
Haley,
that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
you go
I
ahead.
was going to ask you to jump in.
Happy to jump in. I think another thing that's notable right now is the discussion about Europe and its consumption of Russian oil and gas. I mean, it really sounds like the U.S. is on board with a strategy of tightening the economic screws, trying to cause economic collapse, if you will, for Russia. That is the strategy that Ukraine has clearly been efforting in, especially in recent weeks and months. And one of the problems there, and Zelensky addressed this, is that you've got Slovakia and you have Hungary that both are using oil from Russia, and Trump wants them to stop. It's going to be a harder case, and Zelensky made this point with Viktor Orban of Hungary. He thinks, Zelensky said that Orban's making a mistake by continuing to use Russian oil. But the point being here that Trump and Zelensky seem to be aligned on this notion that the way to halt Putin is to halt the consumption of oil and gas, not just by Europe, but then also putting pressure on India and China, the major consumers. They're the ones who are filling Putin's coffers for his war machine.
Okay, Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini, White House correspondent Haley Bull, thank you both.